Oh, you are live, says StreamYard. Good evening, everyone. Hope you're well. Hope you had a lovely, enjoyable weekend. Not too busy, obviously. Took your time out. Enjoyed life's finer things. I went on the river for a bit with my family, which was lovely. I did that on Sunday, not Saturday, sadly, but there we go. Welcome to the recording of the podcast. Which is very exciting. You know the deal now. I'm about to try and share the podcast on Facebook so it gets as many eyeballs on it as possible, which is fun. We are live. We've made the deadline, which was kind of an achievement in itself, actually. So there we go. We have a delightful, delectable group of people waiting for you. Let me remember how to do that. There they go. Oh, look. Sorry, I caught Steve mid-shuffling in his seat there. There's Steve, Susannah, and Michael. Definitely not going to call Susannah Susan tonight. That is a vow. So that's very exciting. We've been struggling trying to think about what we're going to talk about. So any ideas, of course, and you're watching, then message in because yeah, I'm sure we'll think of something. So yeah, let me share this. Yeah, get your questions and comments in over the course of the evening. We'll do our best to answer some of them as we go along. Of course, which is grand. I do wish there was a better way of me doing this, but it is relatively quick once I get going, I promise you. So yeah, episode 102 tonight, which is obviously good going. Successive weeks as well, which is something that has eluded us in recent times, so that's good too. We'll come up with some fun things. A little flag up for last week's. If you haven't watched or listened to last week's pod, make sure you do, because there's some lovely stuff with Millie Davis about the women's team there. And it was great having her on. So that is good. Not anything remotely as positive to talk about this week. But we'll crack on. A couple more of these to do, which is exciting. The joys of social media. I love social media. There we go, done. And then I'll just practice my buzzer, which you can't hear, can you? No, you can hear. There it is. Right. Without much further ado, I reckon we crack on. Get your comments in as we go along, obviously, as I said, and we'll try and keep an eye on that. And Steve, who I didn't tee up before, but I'm sure Steve will also try and have a look at these nodding, so that's grand. Right. I know you're all waiting for the music, so let's get on with some music and then enjoy the podcast. See you on the other side. Hope you have fun. We've already laughed at the fact that I'll try and make it a 45-minute effort, which originally I said would be 9, and it's already 27 minutes past 8. So that tells you how well this is going. Also, I hope you like my Lego hair, especially for all you watchers. Right, enough of that. Let's crack on, shall we? Enjoy the pod. See you on the other side. Hello all, and welcome to edition 102 of the On The Ball podcast. Can't read an intro, turns out. Welcome to edition 102 of On The Ball, which is the Norwich City podcast that is desperate to scale new heights every week. I'm Michael Bailey. I cover the Canaries for The Athletic, and I hope this finds you safe and well and forgiving of my intro reading, but maybe more than just that over the course of the rest of this podcast. On the way, gaping holes, Saudi trolls, climbing goals, and Villa's lost souls. We'll work through all that and more with our guests this fine evening. They are Norwich numberwang chief at NCFC Numbers, also known as our very own Steve Sanders.
Hello, Michael. Giving yourself an early edit to do there.
Yeah, no, don't bother editing anymore. I think everyone's realized that. We also have City fan and On The Ball's official lawyer, which immediately makes her a vitally important member of the pod, given there's always a risk we'll defame someone. It's Susannah George.
Hi, Michael.
There we go. And last but by no means least, it's sports. Oh my goodness, this poser. Sports broadcaster and journalist Michael McCann, and presumably someone who can also get their words out better than me.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Yes, proven that he can. Fine work indeed. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Thanks for everyone listening and watching live, of course, on the socials. How are we doing, Steve? It feels like a long time since we've done a podcast together.
Yeah, I think the hundreds, but we missed maybe a couple of weeks since then. Just to warn everyone, I'm only going to be giving 90% of myself tonight. I hope that's okay with you, Michael, and the rest of the listeners. Just to let you know, and hopefully I'll be able to carry on after the summer as well with that in mind.
90% of you is more than good enough, Steve. You know.
Oh, thanks, Michael. Well, that's if it's good enough for Delia and Michael, then it's good enough on the ball, right? So, anyway, sorry. I don't know what I'm saying. You should move on. You should move on to someone else now.
Well, yeah, we'll move on to a different subject, shall we? Obviously not. Yeah, this could be my easiest pod hosting job ever. I like this. Well, I'm glad you're well. Susannah, how are you?
I'm good. Yeah, not too bad. Thank you.
Exciting day tomorrow.
A little bit.
It's Susannah's birthday tomorrow.
Oh,
so
happy birthday for tomorrow.
Oh,
Happy
thank
birthday.
you.
happy birthday for tomorrow. Yeah, we'll probably sing you happy birthday before the end of the show.
Aw.
Depends how desperate we get, maybe on for some positivity. How are you?
No, I'm not. I'm well. Considering the weekend, I'm quite good.
Excellent. That's I think pretty much all we can ask for. Michael, thanks for joining us. We've had a couple of false starts, haven't we? So it's good to have you here. I think my fault, I had to pull out some of them. So great. Thank you for making yourself available. How are you?
I'm good. Yeah, I'm just getting myself back into Norwich City mode, having spent 2 hours dealing with under nines at West London's finest cricket establishment, Acton Cricket Club, which there's some kind of joke in there about under nines cricketing ability being better than what Norwich have done on the pitch this season. But I was too busy hurrying back to necessarily bring those together in a way that didn't seem grossly insulting to the entire club's history and instantly get me banished off the podcast. So I'm just going to leave people to work with that as they wish.
There is no chance you being banished off the podcast for that. And also, I thought you were going to say insulting to the under 9 cricketers, to be honest. So
well,
you're absolutely fine.
Exactly. It's that one. It's that classic thing where you set up the two, and then it's the that's you know where I was going with it.
We know how it works. Don't you worry. Well, it's lovely to have you all on. We're in for a cracker, I'm sure. He says, bigging it up. So let's get straight on, shall we, with our headline act. So, Norwich were thrashed 3-0 by Newcastle United at Carrow Road. It takes them to the brink of relegation, and yet I'm not sure anyone bothered to talk about that at any point during the weekend. Instead, we had the publicising of sporting director turned mountaineer Stuart Webber, his new Summit Foundation, and some pretty ugly scenes at Carrow Road clipped up on Twitter, albeit only involving a handful of supporters. Still, I'm going to leave it to you guys, actually, I think, to decide whether we talk about the football on the pitch or the stuff off it first. Obviously, we'll get to both. So I don't know if we want to take it, just say off or on. Well, Steve,
off.
Your vote?
Off.
Michael?
Off.
Susannah?
I was going to say on, but we can do off.
Well, had I had a casting vote, I would have probably said off. So did a few people on Saturday. They were all shouting something and then off. I can't remember what it was. I mean, I'm going to assume everyone listening and watching already knows all of the details. I'm not going to go through it all, but maybe for a quick summary, I think we all knew that Stuart Webber was going to climb Everest. If not, then they will do now. To do that, Zoe Ward, who's of course executive director and Stuart Webber's wife, and Webber himself have set up the Summit Foundation to raise money for young people and to help them give opportunities, which will be primarily a locally based foundation that is there to raise money alongside the publicity for what Stuart Webber is aiming to do, which is to climb Everest in the next 2 years, something he's going to pay for himself at a cost of £250,000, which is a lot of money. He did an interview with The Times, which went live on Friday evening. That has had, I don't want to say a mixed reaction because I haven't seen anyone say anything positive about it, to be honest. And it was all anyone was talking about at Carrow Road when Norwich were, as I said, thrashed 3-0 by Newcastle and were pretty rubbish. And then some supporters were waiting for Stuart Webber outside the ground. It was filmed and it looks pretty ugly. And that's pretty much all the details. And now we're all sitting here going, "Oh, blimey, that was a weekend." There is a piece on The Athletic wrapping up all that and a few little other bits, which I'm sure we'll probably talk about as well tonight. But if you want to read that, you can over at The Athletic. Steve, I've got written down here, what do we make of it?
Well, I mean, we tend to get quite a lot of comments, I notice, about Stuart Webber. They've grown and grown, you know, as you ask me to look at the comments. And I think generally we sort of tend to kind of gloss over them a little bit, because he does seem to get a harder ride from a lot of fans than I feel he sometimes deserves, given where he's got us. But I can't help but think, you know, because my day job is in communications, and I can't help but think of the media team at Norwich City when they saw that interview, whether they had anything to do with it, I don't know, and just thinking, what on earth is that? Like, you know, from a guy who seems so savvy with PR and with, you know, getting positive messaging across, to deliver something like that to the Times, it just seems utterly bizarre. Because he comes across, you know, regardless of the points he's trying to make, he comes across terribly. And, you know, his audience is Norwich City fans, and he just seems so aloof, almost contemptuous towards Norwich City fans. And, you know, I think he makes some fair points within what he's saying, but it just feels like there's a sense of entitlement and a sense that he doesn't really want to be here. And now, I think up to a point, he's right. If he wants to go off and do extracurricular things, he should be allowed to do that. But at a time like we're in at the moment, when things aren't going well, to kind of raise his head above the parapet. And by the way, I think we know now why he hasn't done it up to this point. And say what he said, it just seems bizarre. I mean, I think the one that stood out to me, or the comment that stood out to me, was where he said something along the lines of, you know, in January, we'd had no money in January, so what do people expect me to do? Sit in my office for 30 days? It's like, well, yeah, mate, that's your job. That's literally, you know, that is the most important part of the year, other than the summer, and that is your job. If we don't have any money, well, you know, I'm not a Brentford in an exceptional case, but they found a player without spending any transfer funds. You know, we got some money from Cantwell moving out on loan, so there were wages available. I mean, yeah, I could go on, and I'm sure I will, but I should probably let others speak. I just thought it was such a massive own goal, and I'm really surprised at a guy who seems very intelligent to give an interview like that.
I mean, I'm certainly here to answer questions and to fill in any blanks, because I think sometimes things maybe aren't clear, and, you know, part of my job is probably knowing more about stuff than most people. I mean, I think the media team at Norwich were aware of the interview before it was done. I kind of knew it was coming, but it was attempted, I think, to be done completely exclusively of football, and to probably a non-Norwich City audience. But of course, that isn't really possible. It doesn't really work, because that is the case when he speaks. That is the audience, essentially, whether he likes it or not, as Stuart Webber. So that, I think, accounts for probably some of the tone of it. Yeah, and there was something else I was going to say, but I'm sure it'll pop into my head. Susannah, you know, you're a paying season ticket holder. Where, and I presume you're going to renew next year. But I mean, where does this all? What sort of feelings does it leave you with?
I mean, it wasn't great. I think I saw I really echo Steve's comments. Like, I think it was just so untactful, the timing of it. Just, I don't know how you can, you know, in the role of a sporting director, come in and say you're only going to give 90% effort, and then how are the players supposed to then go and put in 100% effort and feel like they need to give it everything? You know, that sort of feeds down through everybody else, and it sort of just gives this general feeling of, well, if he's not bothering, why should I? And I think it just feeds really, really bad energy to an already very, you know, there was a very low morale anyway, just by virtue of where we were. And I just think it wasn't very tactful. It was, I've seen the phrase tone deaf thrown around, and I kind of agree with that. I think it was bad. It was kind of like Meghan and Harry's Oprah interview, wasn't it, in terms of rocking the kind of Norwich City world? It wasn't great.
I suppose, Michael, to a degree, this is what has happened. But by the same token, it probably would have been more accepted had Norwich have been, 16th in the Premier League and the summer recruitment had done well. So it feels like potentially a culmination, and maybe that's the issue with the timing, for everything to come around like this. I have thought about the other thing I was going to mention as well, which is that I know there have been people who really wanted Stuart Webber to speak and be like, where is he? I don't necessarily see it, and trust me, I'm someone who would be asking for it and requesting it. I don't see it as abnormal that the sporting director wouldn't necessarily speak until things are resolved this year. I think as soon as Norwich were relegated or are relegated, we will hear from him. That doesn't necessarily maybe explain the bit after January and immediately after the transfer window. But, given there was nothing to be done that month, maybe there was nothing to talk about and it was a case of letting them go on. And he wouldn't normally have spoken in November, but, he sacked the head coach. So he spoke then. So I don't necessarily take issue with that because I know that he is going to do some media once Norwich are relegated. But that was the other thing I was going to mention. But that doesn't help with whatever the question was that I was going to ask you, Michael. Which is, I suppose, ultimately, is this more of a culmination than just an issue with what happened at the weekend?
Yeah, I think when you're a journalist, particularly trying to come from an outside perspective, you're trying to not just see that moment, but that moment within a season and that season within a collection of seasons. And I think it's easy for Norwich City fans to forget, but within the arc of, people understand what I mean when I mention this, of sort of doing a Burnley with nicer football. You go up, you're very sensible, you're very shrewd, expectations are incredibly low, you have nothing to lose. You come back down expecting to go up again with the expectation that when you go up that second time, you're going to challenge, you're going to realistically be in a relegation battle, but you're going to be more competitive in that relegation battle. And then you see a team that in terms of their numbers and their points per game and how they're performing are actually at a similar level to 2 years ago. And I think the other thing that makes it even more galling for Norwich City fans is if you look at the points total this year, it looks like 34 might keep you up. It's not even like you're going to have to be that remarkably good to stay up. If Norwich had even another, and I can see Michael ruefully smiling as I say this, if Norwich even had another sort of 6 points, 7 points now, which given the resources, even with their meagre resources, is not an unreasonable thing to think they could have by this stage of the season, they would be genuinely competitively in a relegation battle. And I think it's that and the fact that enough of those signings over the summer didn't work and didn't manage to get them to a place where at least they were in that fight with Leeds, Brentford and Everton, who are seemingly doing their very best to get relegated. And it's that context. And then, as Steve and Susannah referred to, the timing as well. And that is something that really surprises me because having covered Norwich as a journalist and a commentator a fair bit across 8 years in this industry, I'd seen the upturn in the club from when Webber took over and how much better things were run, how much better and more regularly the fans were communicated with in what seemed to be a very honest, open and transparent way. And I'll be honest, my actual overriding emotion is surprise, because under previous regimes at Norwich City, something like this happening, being communicated in this way, wouldn't have really shocked me in context of the wider thing going on. But to do something like that now, at this point, when you've had this season that was meant to be the season where you compete, where you are genuinely, to put it aside, competitively in a relegation battle, which they're not, let's be frank. To say this then, just as you're about to be relegated, I just didn't quite get why. I agree with what Steve said. There was a lot in the actual piece and the context, because as a journalist myself, I hate it when people judge a headline. I actually agreed with a lot of what he said. I don't think it's healthy in the 21st century, even for a sporting director, to work 52 weeks of a year, 7 days a week, 7 until 7. That is not a healthy, sustainable lifestyle. It's not good for your mental health. It's actually not good for your output and your performance in the job. However, to go about this bit of extracurricular self-development is one thing. to then communicate it like that at that time, yeah, I was a bit shocked about the way that was put across. And the question I suppose I find myself asking is, what was the benefit of doing that Times piece? And to me, Stuart Webber is someone that will be a sporting director at clubs a lot bigger and higher profile than Norwich City. I still stand by that. I think if you look at his body of work across the period of time he's been there, people forget where he took them from to where they are now, which is still a much better place and still a team that will start next season as a championship promotion contender. But why do that piece and why do it now? That was what I found myself asking.
I find it interesting that you're convinced of that, because I have to say I'm entirely. I think there's a big part of me, and I've said this for years now, 3 or 4 years, that I think it's entirely possible Stuart Webber would leave football and go and do something else and something else. And I think in some ways that seems far more likely now.
Climbing mountains, I guess.
Well, yeah, but he will finish that.
But it's possible we could both be right, Michael. In that I think he comes across as someone. You see some of these people from working in football a while now who are just so obsessed with football they can't live without it. He strikes me as one of those people that has a bit more of a balanced view of the world, which I actually think is not an unhealthy thing at all. I could see him going off and doing something like that, but then coming back to football in a major way. I mean, you remember this guy. This guy's got a serious CV for someone who's in his 30s, and that's why I stand by the fact that I think that as and when he comes back, he'll end up going to a higher level. And maybe this is an episode that when he's in a future role as well, and potentially the rest of his Norwich City role, he'll have seen the response it's got and thought twice in terms of a communications viewpoint about learning some lessons, maybe.
I mean, I think the other thing for me is that's kind of sad is he's tainted his legacy with what he's done. Like I can't, because I mean, you know, I've seen it in the comments. Someone said Webber's record is quite poor overall. I've seen people listing all the bad signings he's made. I mean, I don't think that's true. I think he's done. He has done a lot of good. But the problem is, and Susannah has already referenced this with the players, the minimum that you ask for with the players and the manager is 100% effort. That's what, you know, that's a cliche, but that is what you ask for. And if any, you know, you can forgive people making mistakes. And he had a bad summer in. He had a bad summer in the window, and I think we can all accept that the money wasn't spent brilliantly. But you kind of defend the guy because you've got to assume he's done his best. He's tried to get the best players in to help us stay up. But for him to then admit, like, well, I'm giving 90%, it just seems like such an odd thing to admit to. And you know, I'm sure, I kind of feel like he must know how that's being perceived, but. Again, it's like know your audience. Football fans aren't going to accept you saying that, and it kind of casts Delia and Michael in a bad light as well, because he said, "Well, I've admitted this to them, and they're fine with it."
Well, so, not only, I mean, this I found, and you know, I was at the Summit Foundation dinner on Thursday night, so I heard a lot of this in a different setting. But that I remember coming home that night and that bit really sticking in my mind anyway. So I was kind of surprised it got repeated and then added in the interview. And it is just an honest thing, but like you say, even if you're arguing whether it's 90% of your living life or 90% of your working life, you know, it's something that if someone was in front of you and you were trying to recruit them, you'd want that full commitment from them, wouldn't you? And you want them to say it, and you know, you'd then work around what that actually looked like. But the point is that he was leaving, and at least in Stuart Webber's words, it was Delia and Michael who said, no, we would rather have 90% of you than nothing of you. We are able, willing, we are wanting to, we are offering that you stay on a new contract. And it doesn't matter that it's not going to be all of you, because a bit of you is better than nothing, but also then presumably better than anyone else doing the job who would be more committed or would be hungry or would be. And I don't know how you keep 90% of something, but yet assume it's going to be as good as the 100% was before that. What are we keeping here? I think that's a really difficult balancing act. And it does kind of, I'm afraid, tap into where we've kind of been with the Norwich City board for years, which is that they let people run the show. They sit off them like Norwich is defending, and let them get on with it. And that can be really good when it's going well, because it's like, look at the trust they give you. It's brilliant. And then there's zero accountability when it all goes wrong, until ultimately they kind of make a decision that's generally too late.
Feels to me like somebody who was too comfortable.
That was a bit of the vibe
knows.
of them. That all I was going to say was that was a bit of the vibe of the David McNally era as well, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Well,
100%.
Exactly.
What baffles me about the whole thing is that isn't it almost exactly what Emmy was saying? And they're like, well, we had to get rid of him. He didn't want to really be here. And I'm kind of thinking, well, I can't deal how you can reconcile both of those positions. Either you have to give 100% commitment and you want to be here, otherwise you're out the door, or you're not. But you can't say, well, it's sporting director, he can stay at 90, but we won't try and keep Emmy, who arguably hasn't done a whole lot.
That is such a good point, and actually, like it kind of leads on to, I guess, the next question, which may be your best place to answer, Michael Bailey. Where does this leave Webber? Do we see him staying beyond the end of this season, or is that it for him?
God, have you read the script, Steve?
Oh, sorry, am I asking you a question?
How does this all play
okay.
out? How am I supposed to answer a question? Oh, yeah, no, I did say I would, didn't I? So there's some really interesting things here now. I've felt the question about Stuart Webber's future beyond this summer has kind of been there throughout. Although they announced that he'd agreed a new contract at the AGM, and the suggestion was he would, it would be for a whole year, and they get to the next summer and then decide if the next year would be his last, which made me think, okay, you're not ever going to get to a summer and it'd be like, right, I'm off. He hasn't signed the new contract, by all accounts, which I find interesting. I don't know why that is. It might just be because they're really relaxed. It doesn't really matter. So, as it stands, he could still leave in the summer. And I'm not sure why that contract hasn't been signed. And, when you just witness something and you just think, I'm not really sure if what that feels like the end. It's just how. And I see a lot of the reaction of Norwich fans. I'm still not convinced. I'd still say it's fairly in the balance whether fans would want him here or not, because a lot of them really appreciate the job he does in the Championship, and how actually, if he wasn't here, would what was left behind be good enough, or would it really impose a horrible situation on Norwich going forwards? I have to say, I'm sitting here at the moment, I fear Norwich being a bit stuck regardless of what happens next, whoever's in charge, because I think they're entirely capable of being a bit stuck in the Championship for a bit, because I've seen it before. So long and short is, I don't know. I expect him to do some media once Norwich are relegated, and that will be probably one of the big questions. But, Stuart Webber has said that even if he is climbing up mountains, there are enough people around the club to look after things when he's not around. So I wonder if he'd maybe feel like that if he wasn't around at all. But I don't know. What do you think? Who wants to go on, Susannah? What do you think?
I really want to know what Dean Smith, what the situation is with Dean Smith, because it might be that when he was brought on, Stuart Webber might have been a massive selling point to him with his track record, and that might sort of be tied in together, and that might be. I just wonder how, if we were to lose Stuart Webber, whether we would maybe even lose Dean Smith as well, if that was almost not a package deal, but if you think you've got a sporting director bringing in business and then they might not be there. I would love to know what sort of agreement there was in that sort of on that level.
That's a good question. So I know that one of Dean Smith's first questions when Stuart Webber and Neil Adams went to his house to try and get him to sign was what was his future. So I would imagine that Dean Smith was aware that Stuart Webber probably wanted to climb some mountains, but was staying. I would have thought, because he's been pretty open about that. He said honesty is not really an issue, because that's kind of what he's been saying. So, but it is an interesting one with Dean Smith, because I even think if Stuart Webber stays and does his job in part, there's a role there for Dean Smith to fill some of the void with his experience. He has kind of been that head coach that's had a bigger role. And he's an intelligent man who could probably deal with it. So he becomes quite important to me. But I don't know what you think. Steve, you were going to say something.
Well, I was just going to say, I was speaking to Ben Mouncer of this podcast at the weekend, and he made the point that, and whether some of this got cut out of the interview, I don't know, but at no point does Webber mention anything about next season or looking ahead to the future. It's all very introspective and kind of confrontational and not really looking ahead, as you would expect a sporting director to do. So I don't know if that's a clue of sorts there. There's just been a comment in the chat as well, just slightly related from James M. 852, Michael. Webber talked in the past about succession planning. If he was willing to walk out the door, was there likely a successor identified, or would this have been Neil Adams? Is it still Neil being? Is that the situation as we understand it if he were to move on?
No, I don't think it's ever. There was kind of this specific line that do not assume that Neil Adams will be the next sporting director just because he's been made assistant, which is kind of interesting because I think at Brighton they made an assistant sporting director and probably had an angling that Dan Ashworth was leaving. So I think, can't remember who it was now, but I think they became sporting director. But so the official line is not to assume that, no, and that it's a vacancy that I guess Norwich would then look to recruit for, and they may find some people. I know the former Burnley sporting director, I think it's Mike Rigg, has been doing stuff with Stuart Webber over the course of the past few months. You think of someone like Kieran Scott, who went to Middlesbrough to become a sporting director. I don't know, maybe he's still in touch with people and fancy coming back. You don't know. There's so many bits and bobs. Or Neil does get promoted. So I don't know the answer to that. I would say in regards to the first point, I know that the whole interview was set up with the premise of not really talking about football. So the fact that he didn't get into next season for me was a sign that this interview isn't about that. But as I said, it kind of the problem is it couldn't not be about football at all because the issues are inextricably linked. And actually, maybe in a way that then put more prominence on the stuff he did say and probably created an issue actually indirectly, which is maybe then becomes an issue about the timing and doing it in the first place. So there we go. Michael, what do you reckon? Stuart Webber still be here to do the summer transfer dealings?
If I had to guess, I would say yes. And the reason being that you've already referred to it, Michael, you've got an ownership that are known for their passivity and not being, I don't think that's a controversial thing to say, and being an ownership that compared to other owners are quite happy to hand Delia and Michael, when James has spoken openly about this, a lot of control over to those running it. So I don't really see them taking that back and saying to Stuart Webber, actually get your coat, you're done, unless the handful of fans, and we have to put this in context as well, because social media can be a bit unhelpful sometimes. That video goes out, suddenly it's all Norwich City fans. It was a handful of supporters. Now, if that handful of supporters is thousands in 6 weeks' time who are losing their rag because Norwich have gone down again, as I alluded to earlier, in a season where expectations were high that they might go down, but they'd at least give it a real go in terms of, not in terms of the transfer spend, but in terms of how that translated to on the pitch. So my prediction would be that it won't get quite that bad. And my prediction on that basis would be that it won't get so bad that Delia and Michael will relieve Stuart Webber of his duties. And so on that basis, and as Susannah referred to the Dean Smith dynamic, I think Delia and Michael are far more inclined to play it safe and have Webber stay and say, look, we've actually got Stuart Webber, who is sporting director with his recruitment, has got us out of the Championship, which Norwich City fans forget. I know because I cover the Championship as a commentator week in, week out. It's a fiendishly difficult division to get out of. Norwich City fans have been spoiled. It's something like 4 promotions in 5 out of the Championship, Steve will know. And they've often made it look a bit easy. And they made it look easy last time because they had 2 cheat codes. One was Emi Buendia and one was Ollie Skip. And they won't have both of those next season. So personally, I would expect, sorry to remind you, I would expect he will be there. And they'll say, actually, for all there's been this, maybe ill-timed article and what's come from it and another relegation, if we look around at Norwich City's opposition in the Championship next year, and we have Dean Smith, a manager with proven experience at that level, and Stuart Webber with proven experience at that level, is it more of a risk to remove Webber, have to go and find someone who, for all those names are all very creditable, do not have the CV of a sporting director that Stuart Webber does? They don't have that yet. None of those do. And it would be difficult for Norwich to find someone that does. And then how do they link with Dean Smith as well? So to me, I don't think Norwich will take that option. I don't think Norwich are a club that inherently has an ownership that likes to take risks. If there were other clubs in that situation, Watford, he would have probably been gone a month ago before the article was even written, and someone else would have been brought in and buy this before they even got to the window, Michael. But that's my inclination, bar something really catastrophically big in terms of a fan protest and all that kind of thing happening, way beyond even the reaction to this article, would be next season. It will be Stuart Webber and Dean Smith. But it's football, isn't it? It's football.
Well, yeah. or Stuart walking out.
Yes. That is the one careful, isn't it?
We will see. We should talk about the football briefly.
Michael, just before we move on, just to quickly crowbar a couple of things in.
Please.
Firstly, it's a shame Dan Brigham's not on because he was ahead of the curve on this with his pick that one out from a couple of weeks ago. So it's a shame that he's not here to follow that up today. But also, I think just to say, don't agree with I feel like it needs to be said, but the fans standing outside the ground shouting dogs abuse, and regardless whether they were goaded by him or not, is it just what are you doing?
Can I make one point on that as well? Because I saw some people saying, "Oh, look, he's laughing at us. He's laughing at us," which was the reaction to the video.
It is laughable, though.
Well, but can I just say, and obviously it's a very short clip. We don't know what happened either side of it, etc., etc. And we've all just seen the clip as it is, and it will be etched in a lot of people's memories. But it is just that clip. I went got a little canoe dinghy thing, and we went to take it out. Great story, this, by the way. We went to take it. We went to take it out at Horning. Okay, so the car, Horning, beautiful part of the world, by the way. So the car is blocking a road. Just while I go and do this all on my own, and the kids and my wife are having fun. And an elderly woman in a 4x4 drives up, sees that the road is blocked, and goes, meh, 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 and then looks in. I can see her in the front window, and she sort of does this really grim, annoyed, I'm not gonna say that, annoyed face, arms in the air, going, "What on earth is this? What are you doing?" And my reaction was to go, "What are you doing? That's hilarious. Why are you doing that?" Yeah. And that's my reaction. Sometimes I would laugh at things if I'm confronted with things because it's like hilarious. And I suppose maybe if you're just getting a load of abuse, you would just laugh at those abuse. I don't think sometimes these things need to be. And you know, the woman, Fliss, and my wife spoke to the woman. Everything was fine. We waited patiently. She waited patiently. We got the canoe happy in, and she moved on. Everything was happy, and we all made up. So
you didn't blow her a kiss then?
Doesn't have to be the no. Did that happen?
Apparently, I mean, I was hearsay. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see that. Yeah. Well, that wasn't on the video. So
the other thing that happened, I actually walked past. I did see part of this go on, but I was told by a friend who stuck around that Max came out of that door and he got abuse from those same people, and it kind of loses impact if you just start yelling abuse at anyone that comes out of that door. I mean, I think he probably wished he'd gone the other side.
Max Aarons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You recruit rubbish, Max.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. I'll tell you what,
a guy who could be playing for Barcelona at this point.
Yeah, allegedly. The Newcastle game. Susannah, what do you want to say about that?
I actually generally had quite a good day because me and some of the girls went for cocktails before at the Cozy Cup, so we were quite merry. And then, of course, it was really bright sunshine, and it was blasting into the Barclays, so I didn't see a whole lot because it was so bright. So it was probably
brilliant.
Didn't see a lot of the bad stuff,
and you couldn't see the football. Best Saturday ever.
No, but on a serious note, I mean, I don't really know if there's any sort of positives. What I found baffling was the situation with Ben Gibson, because he was on the bench, and whether or not that was, obviously we don't know what goes on in training. Obviously he made the mistake the weekend before, but you know, when we took Zimmerman off, and we were suddenly like, oh, why have we only got one centre back? And they were like, oh no, we've moved Sam Byram across. Well, what's going on? And I sort of, I just can't. I don't know what's happened with Ben Gibson, but I think he still would have been a really solid choice in that team. I've looked back at the stats, and that we haven't picked up a single point. He's basically been featured in every game where we have picked up a point this season, and so has Pukki, and they're the only two players, I believe, that have featured in every game that we have picked up a point in.
Good stats
and
work, Susanna.
and if we are to
competition,
but
if we're to check.
But if we're to sort of disown Billy Gilmore on the same stats that he has, he's normally party to losses, although we can't blame him for this weekend. Surely you then have to look equally at those performances. And another one to throw in there is Brandon has been party to every win as well. And he didn't feature at all on Saturday, and that's two solid defenders. Genius has got a fabulous record, so I can see why, but I think we give our defenders and even Tim Krul as well a lot of stick for small mistakes. Strikers, Josh Sargent has missed sitters, Pukki has, but we really rain down on the one or two, mistakes that maybe concede a goal. But that shouldn't be the entire performance. That shouldn't be the entire story. And I think they got a lot of stick for that. And I don't really know why Ben wasn't played on Saturday.
I do.
Okay.
In that he didn't come on. Dean Smith said he didn't come on because he felt they were being undone by Newcastle's pace up front. So and I presume he felt that Ben Gibson was as slow as Christoph Zimmerman. So therefore, Sam Byron moved across. Actually did quite well at centre back, I thought, but obviously he had the pace to deal with the situation. My issue with that reasoning from Dean Smith was, well, kind of would have known that Newcastle were quick up front, so but I guess maybe you wouldn't have thought to start Sam Byram there from the off, so maybe that's a bit harsh, and he did at least deal with the problem as he saw fit. But I think Ben Gibson was okay because he went to the boxing on Saturday night to watch Tyson Fury. So and absolutely, am I not criticizing for that? By the way, he is more than able to go and do something he enjoys in his own spare time, which as long as he's giving 100% when he's on the pitch. Oh, we're not going to go over this again, are we? So that's great. I don't know if there's much more to talk about the game, but maybe we'll touch on some of the other issues in our next section. But just on the third goal, who are we blaming? Do we blame Tim Krul or do we blame Kenny McLean? Because they had an argument about it, Steve.
Tim Krul.
Tim Krul.
Tim Krul, who got his first assist for Newcastle since 2015. So congrats to him on that one. But yeah, it was a bad pass. I can't see how Kenny got shrugged off a little bit, but it was a poorly played pass. I think he has to take that one on the chin, unfortunately.
I imagine as a footballer, if a pass is bad, and it felt like Kenny knew if he didn't make it, it wasn't his fault. Because
also, I'm not a goalkeeper. But I feel like if a goalkeeper makes a mistake that could be blamed on another teammate, to save face, you have to have a go at that player just to make it look like it wasn't your fault. It happens all the time. So I think that's just like Krul kind of, just switching into that mode of thinking.
As you've reminded me of Oh, sorry, Michael. You just reminded me of a funny moment where Tim Krul was obviously getting some lovely chants from Newcastle fans because they love Tim Krul. But, it was 3-0, so Tim just ignored him, at which point they booed him. And then after the full-time whistle, they sung his name and he was sort of walking back over to the other pitch and he did this kind of dismissive, like, yeah, thanks for that kind of wave at them. It's like, leave me alone, which I thought was like, yeah, you're a bit sort of between a rock and a hard place there. Sorry, Michael.
No, I was just going to add the 3 words came to mind when I heard Susannah talking very eloquently about all of that, which was rearranging deck chairs and Titanic, really. They got rid of Gibson because of the errors at Old Trafford, but then Zimmerman comes in, doesn't fit what Newcastle do. One thing I'd pick up on that I've noticed is a really interesting sort of statistical trend. And once I'd seen this, I couldn't unsee this in tables. Overwhelmingly, a goal is pretty much worth a point. It's very rare that a team has, unless they've got an insanely good defence, is in the promotion places with a lot less goals than points and vice versa. And Norwich are no bucker of that trend. And if you look at 2 years ago and this season, there's not actually too much difference. For me, Pukki's the player of the season. Pukki scored 10 goals off pitiful service. And that matches up pretty well with his expected goals. That matches up pretty well with what you could reasonably expect of anyone in the bottom 6 and in that mini league that Norwich are in. The problem Norwich have had is the same problem from 2 years ago, is in midfield in particular, in terms of contributing with both assists and goals. I mean, that is the crux of it. If you had even sort of, much like 2 years ago, you probably would have looked at people like Vrancic and Zimmerman. You now would be looking at, midfield or forwards. You would have been looking at Campbell when he was here. You would have been looking at Sargent, Rashica, maybe the likes of Lise Melu and Sorensen, etc., just chipping in. You just haven't really had that. You only need 2 of those players to have scored or 3 of them to have scored 2. And that's another 6. Like, it sounds so little,
honestly,
right? No, but you see what I mean? Right?
No, I do.
I
get it. Norwich's goal scoring.
The back line have actually chipped in a little bit. They've done about what you could reasonably expect off defenders in terms of adding in some goals. But if you'd have got 3 pairs out of your midfield and your further advanced forward players, that's 6 goals. That's probably 6 points. And as I alluded to earlier, that 6-7 points is all you need to be still at this point and competitive. And to me, from how I read Norwich fans, that's what they're asking for. They're not expecting to be 15th necessarily, but they're just expecting that even if we are in the bottom 3 with X number of games to go, we're in the bottom 3, but we're in a fight and we've realistically got a chance, as opposed to, as you've alluded to a few times, Michael, on your video verdicts, where quite understandably nobody really believes at this point apart from that squad.
I think, our own goals, Steve, still joint top scorer at the moment.
I think they might be. I don't know if Sargent. I think is it 2 own goals and 2 Josh Sargent goals. Just a very quick. I mean, I just double checked. Not that I needed to, because obviously Susannah's facts are sacrosanct. But
nailed it.
But yes, Gibson and Pukki, and also we've not scored in the 6 games that Pukki hasn't started across both Premier League seasons. We've not scored a single goal in any of them. Haven't scored a goal.
That's just so unsurprising.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
It's a good stat. Don't get me wrong.
It's great. I
didn't mean to sound insulting, but
No, you're right. You're right. It is.
Use full of them. Right. Well, I think that is the longest ever headline act. So in that case, we're going to rattle through all the rest of the podcast in about 5 minutes. But let's crack on, shall we, with a bit of this. It's Pick That One Out, where the podders each get a short window to bring up an issue they're struggling to let go. If they lose themselves for more than 30 seconds, the buzzer sounds, which is here. Phew. And it is then time to let go, maybe. Who would like to go first? Susannah, is it your birthday tomorrow? Would you like to go first?
I can do.
I'm sorry. It was
tell
meant
me when to go,
though. You can go now, if you like.
Okay, I know it's been a really disappointing season, but I cannot get on board with people leaving before the full-time whistle. Not that long ago, we weren't even allowed in the grounds. So I think it's just rude to leave. And, we're berating Stuart Webber for only giving 90% effort. But if we leave, 5, 10, 15 minutes before the end, we're not doing any better than he is. We're only giving half our effort in as well. And crucially, those last few minutes are probably when we've made all our subs. And the only energy the players are going to get is from the fans. And if we're not there, it's not going to happen.
It was quite sad seeing Jacob Murphy sort of applaud 50 people in the Barclay for his big return. And he did quite well, bless him. But I mean, that's a lot of people that you're taking issue with on Saturday, because there were not many people left for the last 5 minutes. But that's okay. That's okay, Susannah.
It's okay if you've got an emergency and you've got to go somewhere, but
as long as you don't leave early, Michael. I mean, that definitely would be.
Well, I couldn't anyway. I once turned up late at QPR.
Obliged.
Yeah, I am.
You know that American footballer that did the whole I'm here so I don't get fined. It's just I have this image of Michael just in the press box when it gets to about 75 minutes, just typing on his laptop, I'm here so I don't get fined.
Hey, we got there were obviously always things to learn, even in the 93rd minute. Michael, would you like to go next?
Yeah.
Okay, when you're ready, off you go.
So I cover women's football a lot, and one thing I noticed is that Norwich City's women's team, who obviously spoke to Millie last week, they're in tier 4 of the pyramid. And not only are they in tier 4, but they're in tier 4 against men's clubs who are not even non-league teams. And not only are they in that division, and this is no criticism of the players on the pitch, so please don't misunderstand me, but they're barely surviving in that division. They need more infrastructure, they need more support, and I would argue that even a self-funding club like Norwich should do $500,000 as a loss leader to support the women's team.
Sorry, that was Millie getting in touch saying here. No, I don't know why my WhatsApp went off, but there we go. Because I've got my thingy on. Well said, Michael. True. I do think there's going to be. I might have written this. Maybe I was going to mention this later. Yeah, I think there might be changes ready for next season and things like that will maybe help with that.
I know they're trying to improve it, but to me, and I know that I've commentated on the FA Women's Championship a bit as well as the FA Women's Super League a lot, and $500,000 a year. Like, I know that doesn't sound like a lot. You can pretty much have a full-time squad, and if Norwich did that and said, right, $500,000 a year is for the women's team, loss leader, do it. There's every chance that within 4 seasons, you'd have a team in the second tier.
Which
and I don't think
it's
asking.
do, I think.
And that was what I was just, that was why I said I'm not going to get this into 30 seconds. But it came to my mind when I was commentating on the FA Cup Women's quarterfinals, and I had 2 games, and one of the 2 I didn't do was Ipswich, a third-tier team who've won their division and are going to be in a playoff against, I believe it's Wolves, for a right to get into the Championship, the second tier next season. And if Ipswich are able to do that, they've kind of put Norwich to shame a little bit there. And if I know that there was a bit about putting player profiles on the website, more marketing, that kind of thing. But I think more can be expected. And I know that about half a dozen or so women's teams with men's Championship or Premier League teams are going full-time next season, who are teams who, like Norwich, are in tier 3 or 4. So if they can do it, there's no real reason why Norwich can do it either, to be honest, because as I alluded to, even with a self-funding model, it costs, compared to the men's side of things, it's £500,000 about. I mean,
here, and it's going to become more prominent given we've got the Women's World Cup coming up in the summer as well. So here. Well said, Michael. Steve, ready?
Got one.
Go for your life.
Okay. I feel like I haven't said this enough this season because we've played a lot of bad teams. Yeah, we haven't said that much. Would anyone here swap places with Newcastle? Would you swap places with a Newcastle fan? Would you swap places on Saturday? I wouldn't. Genuinely would not. Like, I don't care if we get beaten every single week. Have your fans waving their cash at their home fans if you want. But I don't. I'm quite happy being Norwich City, quite honestly. And I think this season has really brought that to light, regardless of how terrible we've been. And Pierre-Lise Malou shouldn't have got man of the match on Saturday either.
Such a specific ending.
Who should have?
I don't know, but he wasn't very good. Based on the first 15 minutes. Let's say Dow. I thought Dow was okay, and I give him a bit of stick normally. So
yeah. Well said. And well said on that. I mean, speaking as someone who got constant really back chat.
Yes, I saw your Saudi
over
flags.
the weekend. I feel like I'll just explain this if I do. Whenever Norwich play, I try and think of an emoji that is relevant to the opposition. I try and be a bit playful with it, because it's, life's dull. When Norwich played Manchester United, I picked the really angry face because they were obviously all really angry at the moment, and sack of cash for Man City, and Portuguese flag for Portugal because of the Jorge Mendes, links and all that sort of
I love the way you just said Portuguese flag for Portugal.
Sorry, for Wolves.
Sorry, Freudian slip there.
For Wolves, yeah. So it was got before the game. I was like, well, they've been bankrolled by Saudi Arabia in terms of, at least the investment from the country, whether it's directly actually owned by the country or from someone else. So, that seems quite apt, so I'll use that. Wasn't really a particular opinion on it. It was that, but it was just the reaction was fascinating because it's obviously incredibly sensitive, and I don't think Newcastle fans know how to process that because I think they're stuck. What can they do? They can't, and so they took it out on me, which is like, okay, fair enough. Yeah, we don't support the regime, or but that's what that has made the difference because no team has survived in that position. And as good as Eddie Howe has done, all of the changes around the club have made a quite an obvious difference as well. Bruno Guimaraes was fantastic on Saturday, and he's a wonderful player. And it's all cumulative. So I feel a bit for the Newcastle fans, not particularly in how they, maybe articulated it, but they're a bit screwed because whatever their opinions are on Saudi Arabia, it's gonna have a profound effect on whatever their football club does from here. So they're gonna have to deal with that, and maybe look at some of there's a brilliant piece that Adam Crafton has written about Saudi Arabia. And its context of where it stands and involvement in football. So there's loads of stuff on The Athletic that you can read about that will put things in far more context than me. But I wasn't trying to annoy anyone. But maybe it's good that it did, because I don't think they can ignore it.
I completely agree with you. I do think fans should never be put in that position to have to make that choice. It's the Premier League who are to blame for this, not Newcastle fans. But ultimately, like if you're gonna cheer a goal that goes in and you're gonna take all the glory from a club that is backed by Saudi investors, and that is what has helped them propel them up the table. You've got to wear. I mean, you've got to wear the jibes. It wasn't even a jibe. You just put a Saudi flag on. You've got to wear it. You take the rough with the smooth, right? That's how it works.
I think they sort of felt, well, why didn't you? I think people thought I would normally have just used a black and white emoji, but I stopped doing that years ago because it's just dull. I just trying to do something.
You were waiting on your emoji.
I think they thought I was doing something particular for them, which I wasn't really. I was just doing what I do for any club. But obviously for them, they could not deal with it. And the fact they could not deal with it, for me, says absolutely everything. So there we go.
I thought they were quite good at the weekend, to be fair. I just thought their support was really good at the weekend. They were fabulous.
But I didn't speak to anyone in the ground of a Newcastle persuasion. It was just people on social media. They were very nice about
Pookie, and they really liked Jonathan Rowe as well when he got on. They think big things. The ones that I spoke to after on Twitter seemed to have, big hopes for Jonathan Rowe, and also really want us to come back up next season, and also want us to bury Everton in the Championship.
Possible. Depends how screwed they are. It's an interesting point because Chris Woff, my colleague, was obviously down from Newcastle. He was talking about what they're going to do in the summer, and they're going to look for a striker. And I have to say, if I was at Newcastle for I don't know, you could probably bid £9 million for Teemu Pukki for 12 months. I reckon Norwich would sell him for that. It cost Newcastle nothing. He'd guarantee them goals. His movement's great. He could play in a 2. I would not obviously want this to happen. I'm going to say that right down the camera. It'd be horrendous. But I just think it's a no-brainer, because I think the biggest issue for Teemu Pukki staying at the moment is that he's quite clearly a Premier League striker in a team that have been miles short of it. And, just be like a no-brainer. The point I mentioned it as well is because one of the things I was not going to talk about is obviously the contract renewals. There's a piece on Todd Cantwell on The Athletic. You can read that. Obviously, they've renewed his contract basically with the intention of selling him this summer, potentially to Bournemouth if they want him, which is sort of hanging in the balance. Matthew Dennis is another contract they've extended. He's done well at Southend. I would envisage that they will try and sell him. That's just to protect his value as well. And then obviously Teemu Pukki, where I don't know. I'm just a bit worried. But
I've got to be honest, I wouldn't be worried about Pukki signing for Newcastle, because I reckon with the embarrassment of riches they have, they'll be shopping well beyond that, to be honest. I just don't see it. When you look at the quality of players they were already able to go and get in when they were actually in a relegation dogfight, as opposed to safely in mid-table with, I imagine their ambition will be Europe next season. They won't mess about. I don't really see that. I think if they had a more normal, reasonable budget, I'd agree with you. But I think when you are playing with that sheer amount of wealth, if I had to bet, you said 9 million, I reckon they'll sign a headline marquee striker for at least 3 times that. We know from football history, team gets a lot of money. One of the first things that happens is striker signs for massive money. And even when they signed Chris Wood, I'll be honest, I looked at that as a tactical, strategic move of let's just take, almost out of spite, because we can, one of our relegation rivals' best players and get him now rather than in the summer, just to make it more likely they go down. And in the nicest possible way, because Chris Wood's a perfectly serviceable sort of bottom half Premier League striker with a very decent career. I don't think Chris Wood will be Newcastle's number 1 striker in even 6 months' time. Never mind 12 months. Chris Wood will be coming off the bench for a cameo, and it will be a name with a pedigree and a CV far beyond Chris Wood or Teemu Pukki.
Yeah, maybe Norwich could get him on loan in the other direction.
Yeah,
other things we are not going to talk about, so we're going to rattle through these quickly. Fan of the season, the voting is up if that's your kind of thing, on the Norwich City website. Ollie Skips extended his Spurs contract, which just made me a bit sad again, but good for Ollie. Have a listen to the Scrimmages podcast on the 50th anniversary of Norwich City's 1972 promotion, which is their first time into the top flight. It's brilliant if you're not not aware of the story, but also some of the little gems in that. Chris and Rob and Co doing a great job on that.
That was an idea first mooted on the On the Ball 100 podcast, I believe, by Chris. He probably had the idea before.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he was well up for doing that, I think. So they did a great job on that, and that's all I've got. So I think we've mopped up that list. I've written here that is half time, but it's quite clearly not half time because we've been going almost an hour. So instead, this was the point where I was going to say no centrefold, but yes, well worth listening to last week's podcast when I spoke to Millie Davies about Norwich City women. So give that a look. And there is a feature on Norwich City women as well on The Athletic. I've done well out of my plugs was the word I was looking for. That was dangerous. Yes, so there's another piece on The Athletic. Go and read that. And that all brings us on to Motti.
This is almost fantasy football.
Yes, indeed. It's where we look ahead and paint a picture of the next 7 days for Norwich City. We are running out of games now. The next one is Aston Villa away. I mean, the fact that Norwich can be relegated at Dean Smith's former and boyhood club is definitely one for the narrative fans out there, and has convinced me it will probably happen. So there we go. I mean, bizarrely, Steve, I think Villa could end up with a worse record this season, mostly under Steven Gerrard, than they did last season under Dean Smith.
Yeah.
Should be curious.
I mean, it's been creeping up on me, actually, that Gerrard doesn't seem to have done a great job there. I mean, you know, I think if you ask Villa fans, they'll probably say, oh, we were going down under Dean Smith. I'm not so sure they would have done. I think he probably would have turned it round, but I can see why they wanted to change. I think next year will be obviously the making or breaking of Gerrard. I'm not necessarily convinced. But as far as Saturday goes for us, it might even be our best chance of getting a win or some points of the games we've got remaining, just because Villa's form hasn't been good. And we only really take points off teams whose form isn't good. Maybe that'll be the end of Gerrard if we win on Saturday. It seems it's done for a few other managers, doesn't it?
Player.
Yeah, I mean that's an alternative narrative there for you, Michael, rather than us going down. I mean, I have to say at the moment, and I'm sorry to sound glass half empty, my main thought is let's just get more points than we did last season. We only need one more, but that's got to be the next thing to aim for. And why not? We could steal a point there, couldn't we? I think if we turn, you know, it was rubbish on Saturday, but to be fair, the two performances before that with the 4-2-3 ones worked pretty well. So I think if they can get that out of their minds and look back to those two games, then perhaps we do have a chance.
They started well on Saturday. It was just the conceding 2 goals in whatever minutes and then rolling over and having their tummies tickled. I saw Susannah on social media. There was a random football Twitter feed, as there are many of, running a poll in 2 parts of worst signings of the season. Obviously, I could only include a total of 8 candidates, none of them from Norwich, which I thought was interesting. But they did include Emi Buendia, which I don't know, really. I mean, I guess as one of the 3 players who was supposed to replace Jack Grealish, I don't know, maybe is that fair? I don't know, but it does seem a bit of a shame to see Norwich struggling and then Emi Buendia sat on the bench at Villa Park.
Yeah, it's not. It's awful. But then, to be honest, actually, you know, they're the mugs because they've paid however many million for someone to warm their bench. So that was sort of poor from them, really, and good for us. Well, maybe I don't know how how well we spend the money, but no. But you can see one of 2 things: either what Steve sort of prophesied, that we may end up getting Gerrard sacked at the weekend, or you can just see them putting Emi on, and it being literally the kiss of death for us. The one performance, like I can just see it being such a Shakespearean tragedy. And it will kind of be in awe and like, oh, Emi, but also, oh no, what have you done to us? Like, I just see it going that way.
Imagine if he was the man who relegated Norwich. I mean, that would be I don't. What I mean,
narratives for days.
You can't write that. Although you clearly can.
I don't know. I just have this horrible feeling. It's either a really good feeling or it's that. I just think it's gonna be one or the other. I don't think it's gonna be a 0-0 draw.
There was a great narrative in the reverse fixture when he nutmegged Todd Cantwell.
Mm.
And that's no slight on Todd Cantwell, because actually he's someone who I think when Norwich City fans have the benefit of a little bit of hindsight will actually realise their club should be incredibly proud regardless of what happens from here. And as you say, Michael, it does look like he'll probably depart this summer one way or another.
That is one of my moments of the season. That one there etched in my head. I mean, bizarrely, Villa have still got to play Burnley twice, Steve.
Yes,
and they've only got 5 games, I think, and 2 of them are against Burnley. So, in fairness, if Burnley beat Villa twice, they'll actually be level on points with them.
Is that right?
It is, yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I think Villa will have a game in hand, but still.
They just haven't tried as hard as Everton to get relegated, though, have they?
No, clearly not. I mean, it is crazy down there. I mean, it's sort of remarkable that Burnley have sacked Sean Dyche and won, unbeaten.
They've got 7 points in 3
out of 9. Yeah.
Since losing at Carrow Road. I mean, that's pretty mental because they weren't that good at Carrow Road. And then Everton also look a bit screwed. I don't know, Steve. What do we want out of this? I mean, clearly because it doesn't matter to us now. But
I can't remember who posted it on Twitter, so I apologise, but I saw it this morning and I saw someone say we don't want Everton to go down because they will inevitably appoint Sean Dyche and then absolutely run away with the division. And I thought, I can actually see that happening. I think we probably, from a Norwich City perspective, we would want Burnley, I guess, because supposedly their finances would be dire. I don't suppose Everton's would be great, but they probably have enough quality to do all right. But I think Burnley would probably be in a little bit of trouble if they did go down. However, from a neutral perspective, we would want Everton because it would be absolutely hilarious, especially with Frank Lampard at the helm. So I'm torn.
It would be hilarious. I do feel like these big clubs, when they end up in the Championship, Michael, do end up getting out of it pretty easily. But I don't know. Maybe Leeds.
Newcastle's the last
Sunderland.
one I remember. Yeah. Well, yeah, true. I mean, I remember when Newcastle went down, and the thing I loved the most was that they lost twice to Scunthorpe whilst rampaging the title and getting nearly 100 points. It's such a brilliant quirk that Scunthorpe.
R.I.P. Scunthorpe as well.
Yeah. I mean, from a point of view of Norwich City, I'm with Steve. I actually think it would be definitely a bad thing for Norwich to have Everton go down. Burnley, by all accounts, have got these new owners with a very questionable leveraged buyout funding model where essentially they've paid for the takeover using the assets of the club, and that's all kind of built off them being in the Premier League. So if they get relegated and suddenly they have to start propping that up, that could all get a bit interesting a bit quickly, because by all accounts they seem to think that they were inheriting a Premier League club when, of course, as we all know, that's a temporary thing. And they wouldn't also have Sean Dyche, which arguably would be their best asset in doing what he's done plenty of times before. So, yeah, but it does seem like at the moment nobody outside of the blue side of Merseyside wants Everton to go down. Everyone wants them to go down. Sort of West Ham early 2000s where they had all this talent and they got 40 points and they still went down. There seems to be some sort of comic hilarity and Schadenfreude about the whole thing that everybody else is sort of desperate for it to happen.
I don't know if we're allowed to enjoy that, are we, Susannah? Are we allowed to mock anyone else?
Well, what you mean Everton by anyone else?
Yeah.
Well, 1985, just ask any Norwich fan, Everton a free game.
That's a great point. We definitely owe him one for that. And that's a really good note to finish on, I think. Were there any other questions, Steve, on the comments? Anything worth flagging up?
There's been
there have been loads. Thank you for all your messages.
Yes, there have been some good ones, and the predicted slagging of Webber in some situations as well. Someone's asked if Webber leaves / is fired, what would that mean for Dean Smith? I think we've sort of half covered that. So yeah, I think mostly thanks for the comments, everyone. But I think we've
covered it all off. Yes, thank you. We are going to do a. Hang on. Well, Simon Copperwheat says that the guy in the blue Zorb ball got his man.
Yeah, he did well. Yeah.
What does that say?
Came from behind as well. Really good performance.
Did he? I missed that. yeah, we are going to do a podcast in future where we just go through all your questions, have a big old discussion. So we'll do that at some point, probably when we're in the midst of relegation and we can carry on. I think for flan of the season, maybe we should run that competition. Can we all make a flan or flan of the season?
How do you make a flan?
I think
we're over time already, but
I think you buy this. Yeah, you buy the sponge from a supermarket, stick the fruit on it, and then put jelly on it. That's how you make a flan, isn't it?
I think Michael's right though. Surely Delia's got flan of the season sewn up most years. I don't think we should start that as a competition.
But the fan of the season is it? I don't know if I want to say Killian, but I could maybe say Cillian or Chillian. But Killian O'Grady, please vote for me. So there you go. Killian's got the vote in for fan of the season. Assuming
got a good propaganda machine going as well.
I know, good work. I hope that helps. And Harry here does ask for the people watching, where is my Pink Floyd photo? It's gone. It's not behind me anymore. You're right, but it is just around the hallway. So don't worry, I do still have it and love it very much. That's obviously very important. But I think we've spoken enough about football, haven't we? Stephen Simons. Happy birthday for tomorrow, Susannah. There you go. Happy birthday to we won't.
The 90% effort that was.
That was 9.
That was 9.
Yeah. Maybe 9. That's the 10.
And I think on that note, we'll wrap it up. That is it for On the Ball, the Norwich City podcast that preferred the May 2019 Villa Park atmosphere, and we haven't even had it yet. If you get to do so, make sure you subscribe. Subscribe, Michael. Subscribe via your podcast player of choice, and you can hear more of me stumbling over words. The pod is available free for everyone on your usual player, and we are streaming the recordings of the podcast live in video form on my social media channels. So make sure you can give those a look and check them out, which if you wish to watch them. Ratings and reviews wherever prompted are always hugely appreciated. And if you want to get in touch with any questions or topic proposals, please do sling me a direct message on Twitter at Michael J. Bailey, and I will do my best to note those. A big thank you to our guest this evening. Michael, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
My pleasure, as always.
Enjoy it. I hope you get to be on Football Focus again soon. We didn't get to mention that tonight.
Oh, that was... I'm going to just let my facial expression come out.
Oh, he's beaming. The
so
guy is beaming.
Honestly, you know that show that you like, you always try and be like cool, professional, whatever, but I actually wasn't watching it because I just done the commentary. It was Arsenal Coventry United FA Women's Cup quarterfinal the night before, and a friend of mine texted me, and I thought he was just pranking me because the commentary's for World Feed, so the BBC could use it if they want, but they normally have their own people. And then checked it, and I was like, oh, he hasn't pranked me. And that was the show that I used to watch. You know that show, right? We all have it. One of those shows that it was like, when I go to a game as a kid, it'd be the last thing I do before going to the game. It's like that. Come on at midday, watch that. As soon as Football Focus is done, get out of the house and go, unless it's a long away day. So, yeah, that was pretty cool. That was pretty special.
Oh, well done. I hope it happens again. And thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure.
Much fun.
Susannah, happy...
Yeah, quite. Susannah, happy birthday for tomorrow. I hope you have a wonderful day. Have you got much planned?
I've taken the day off work because it seemed really sad to be working from home on your own on your birthday. Okay. But my friend's coming from London, so we're going to have a nice day around Norwich, which will be nice.
That sounds lovely. Go get yourself a flan. A birthday flan. That's my contribution. I hope you have a brilliant day, and thank you for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. Steve, thank you as always.
Thank you. Yeah, a pleasure. Absolute pleasure. It felt good to let off some steam this week, actually.
Good. I feel glad that this is hopefully a line under it for until tomorrow. So that's good. We'll do it again soon, I hope. We'll be back next week, in fact, for a fresh bout of Canaries Capers in another edition of the On the Ball Norwich City podcast. But until then, he says, just trying to find the outro music. Never mind the danger. And we're clear. Susannah, Steve, Michael, All you
Hello.
Twitterers out there, welcome to Wits End. If any of you have stumbled across this for the first time, listen to On the Ball podcast number 42, which went live on September the 8th, 2020. When climbing mountains was just a figment of people's imagination. That's not true. It's all explained there. You can email this bonus part of the podcast directly if you wish. Twitterkers, Twitter, KERS at iCloud.com, or use the hashtag Twitterkers on Twitter. Just don't explain what it's referring to, because this is a secret club for only those who discover it, which I've realized is an issue because Nick Dye tweeted a clip of the US Open Cup with the hashtag Twitterkers and the hashtag Pull and Market. I've got no idea why. I don't know what that's got.
Do we need Nick to explain himself?
So Nick, if you can get back in touch with the hashtag and maybe just explain
what was it of?
It's of it was of a clip of the US Open Cup, which is a competition I've never heard of. Michael,
in what sport?
Does that sound like golf, doesn't it?
Oh, it's football. It was football.
Oh,
sorry,
football.
it was football. And it was in the US, but I don't know.
Josh Sargent, any Josh Sargent links there? Does Josh Sargent live in Pull and Market?
No.
And
okay.
He's from like O'Fallon kind of.
Nick Dye.
I can't remember.
But he might live in Pull and Market now.
Oh, I wonder if it's a team Nick's involved in. And I think he is from Pull and Market, so it might be that. But basically, it was Edson Cardona and the Bay Cities FC taking the lead deep into the 90 against Monterey Bay to put them 2-1 up in the US Open Cup. So I reckon that's maybe Nick Dye, because he is a coach, his hard work. So that's great. Guy from Pull and Market. I mean, I'm assuming this is true. It might actually be nothing to do with that. But I'm going to say well done, Nick Dye, on your
well done, Nick.
Success. Well done.
Possibly well done.
We hope. If not,
please explain yourself.
And the other thing, you may remember back in the day when I had a toothache. Update.
Oh yeah, how did that go? Can we have an update on your teeth, please?
The tooth doesn't ache anymore, but I did ring the dentist and he said, you're still going to need it, drilled. So I'm going to have that done at some point, and I'll be able to tell you whether it was less painful than relegation. Or this particular relegation anyway, because I remember all the other ones. But we were sort of umming and ahhing about tooth puns, and James Hotchkiss came back with Andre Wisdom, of course.
Oh, that's really good.
Cracking one. And I have to say, I saw Chris Gorham for a coffee after he was live on the pod, and he did say Andre Wisdom as well. So great minds, James and Chris. Andre Wisdom. I don't think we'll get any better than that for Norwich City tooth puns.
Did I say it? Have I said Brian Gum yet?
Oh,
have I said that? I can't remember if I said that when I was on before.
That is wonderful. That is good. Well done.
Kenny McLean your teeth, but that's probably about
Kenny McLean your teeth.
That's really good. That is really good.
That's a touch. That's not bad.
Well, in fairness, wasn't there a McLean's toothpaste?
There was a McLean's toothpaste. Yeah. So it works on so many levels.
Some kind of pun about not cleaning up in midfield this season, but again, I'm not a puns man, so I just like to set the thing up and let everyone else roll with it.
Yeah, I mean, Susannah's brought her A game, Michael, so I'm afraid that it just doesn't.
I don't have puns. The only thing I've got that I prepared for this segment was I'd heard. I'm not going to lie, Michael made this sound like it might be quite a somber occasion. So I thought I would try and bring something positive for Norwich City fans, and I thought I'd also bring a trip in the TARDIS. So which one do you want first?
Oh, wow.
How
long are they, Michael?
they're both not too long.
Okay, let's rattle through them. TARDIS first.
The TARDIS there's always a time when it was worse. Leighton Orient at home, October 2009. Paul Lambert had come in, but the magic hadn't really worked. They had 10 points from 9 games. They were about 7 points off the playoffs already. It was, oh my goodness, Norwich are going to be having at least a second season in League One. And then 78 minutes gone, Chris Martin finds the bottom corner. They go on and win 4-0. They beat Bristol Rovers 5-1 on Saturday. And the next thing you know, at the end of the season, the bloke that put a bet on 100 points and 100 goals, I think nearly won that bet. So that's
oh my God, I bet you're still sick about that one.
I think they ended up on like 97 or whatever it was.
Yeah, I hope he doesn't remember that.
There's always a moment when it's worse.
Good.
Because,
What was the other option?
Actually ended up at that game with a friend. The positive one is I commentated World Feed on a certain other club from East Anglia that I know Norwich City fans have a lot of disdain for. Rotherham against Ipswich Town, and Ipswich Town confirmed, even though it was basically done before the game, that mathematically they won't be in the playoffs with 2 games to spare. And I was kind of linking the TARDIS and the positivity with the fact that it's always a bit worse elsewhere. And if Norwich City fans want a bit of consolation, it's that for all Kieran McKenna, actually, to his great credit, has improved them a lot since he got there. He still didn't improve them quickly or well enough to have them even in the playoffs in League One, never mind automatically promoted. So
there are some Norwich fans who hate any references to Ipswich at the moment. They can't bear it because it's like, stop using that to cover up what's going on here. But there are a lot who love it.
There was one little bit that people would enjoy, that my friends who were Norwich fans were texting me saying, you have to mention this. And I could perfectly legitimately within the commentary, which is, of course, who was managing Rotherham? A certain Mr. Paul Warne.
Well, has
his Norwich City connections, and made it very clear within the course of the commentary, rightly so, that he would enjoy this all the more sweetly. And Mr. Paul Warne has an extraordinary record against Ipswich: 6 wins from 7 and 6 clean sheets. So he seems to bring out a little bit extra from him. And that was the other bit that I just slipped into the delight of Norwich City supporting friends was, of course, the fact that as well as his personal head-to-head record against them being that good, they still haven't beaten Norwich since whatever it was, 2008, 2009. I had the information at the time. Which is
Are we talking about Rotherham or Norwich?
No, Norwich hadn't beaten Ipswich. So the point is that Warne, as a Norwich fan, had a great record against them, and that on a wider level, they very much didn't hold the bragging rights in East Anglia, which that was around the time where we were still arranging to come back on, Michael. And I was thinking, okay, well, Lady Luck has handed me a nice little thing to come on the Norwich City podcast.
Yeah, I love that. Good old Warney. What a superstar.
They're doing a Norwich, Rotherham, a division below. They do the same thing.
They're struggling a bit at the moment.
I think I might have said.
Just go up,
I think I may have said after the Rotherham game when we beat them 2 years ago, we'll see them back again in 2 years. Lo and behold. Just to add as well, Stephen Stibbons says Jeremy Floss.
There it is.
That is good.
Jeremy Floss. I think on that note,
let that one go.
I think that whether it's the end of the tooth puns, who can say? Not me. Let's see. If you've got any others, get in touch with us with them, please. Twitterkers@icloud.com is the email, or #Twitterkers, or any other puns, really. I'm well up for just talking about puns between now and the end of the season and football.
Let's not review any more football.
Don't tell me this isn't more enjoyable. But that is it. We've had a remarkable, wonderful podcast. I think we should wrap it up now. So thank you all for being absolutely brilliant and stars. Go and enjoy the rest of your time in your lives until we next meet. And it would be good if you could say goodbye on 3, if that's okay. So 1, 2, 3.
Goodbye.
And there we go. They're all done. I've got something stuck in my throat, which is exciting. But that is it for this week's podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you felt it cathartic in some way, and maybe slightly entertaining too. We'll be back next week after the Aston Villa game. I will be at Villa Park, probably, so you don't have to be. So yeah. Either way, I will see you very soon. Get in touch with us and look after yourselves. And until next time, that's a rope. And that is actually the end of the podcast, where it will end. Thanks all for watching. If you're here, thanks for all your questions and comments. As I said, we will do a podcast where we go through and have you properly asking the questions, and that will set the agenda of the podcast. We'll do that at some point before the season ends, I promise. Thanks to the guys. They were brilliant. Have a wonderful rest of your Monday evening, and I'll see you all very soon. In the meantime, take care of yourselves. Bye.